Welcome back to the Explainer. All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're looking at a real heavyweight bout in the cloud data world, AWS Glue versus Azure Data Factory.
You know, these days, organizations are just swimming or maybe even drowning in data. And to get any real value out of all that information, you've got to move it, clean it, and get it ready for analysis. We call that whole process ETL. That's extract, transform, and load. And when you're talking about doing this in the cloud, two names always pop up: AWS Glue from Amazon and Azure Data Factory from Microsoft.
So, to really get a grip on these two, it helps to think of them in a certain way. I like to think of AWS Glue as this super smart assistant. You know, the kind that just handles a ton of the heavy lifting for you automatically. Then you've got Azure Data Factory, which is more like a customizable assembly line. It gives you this incredible fine-grained control over every single step of the process.
All right, let's ring the bell for round one. Because when you look under the hood, these two services are really built on completely different ideas about how you should tackle your data challenges.
Okay, first up we have AWS Glue. Now, this is a serverless service, and all that really means is you don't have to think about servers at all. No provisioning, no managing. AWS takes care of all that behind the scenes. That whole intelligent assistant idea, that really comes from its crawlers. These things automatically scan your data, figure out the format, and even suggest the structure or schema. The whole thing runs on Apache Spark, which is this incredibly powerful engine for, well, crunching massive amounts of data. Now, on the other side of the ring, you've got Azure Data Factory, or ADF. It's a different beast entirely. It's less about that automatic discovery and way more about orchestration and control. See, it's that assembly line we talked about. ADF lets you visually design these really complex data pipelines, and you can connect to over 90 different data sources, which is huge. And here's a key point. It also supports ELT, extract, load, transform. That's a slightly different pattern, but it gives you a ton of flexibility, especially for modern data warehouses.
All right, so we've got the basic philosophies down. Now, how do they actually stack up, feature for feature? Let's get into the nitty-gritty and do a real head-to-head comparison.
Okay, the first big difference is how you actually build with these tools. AWS Glue is, at its heart, a code-first tool. Yeah, it has a visual interface, but for anything really complex, your developers are going to be writing code in Python or Scala. Azure Data Factory, though, it's all about that visual drag-and-drop experience. This makes it way more accessible to a much bigger group of people, even folks who don't have a deep coding background. And you can see how this focus on different users plays out in their ecosystems too. Take connectivity, for example. Azure Data Factory has a pretty clear lead here, with over 90 built-in connectors. It's also a real star in what we call hybrid environments, where you've got to connect stuff in the cloud with your own on-premises servers. AWS Glue has more than 60 connectors, and no surprise here, it integrates perfectly if your whole world is already inside AWS, using services like S3 and Redshift. This brings us to another really important point: flexibility. We already mentioned that ADF supports both ETL and ELT, but for a lot of big companies, this next part is the real game changer. ADF has native support for Microsoft's SSIS packages. If you're not familiar, SSIS is a super common tool for on-prem data work. With ADF, you can pretty much just lift and shift those existing workflows straight to the cloud. That's a massive deal. With AWS Glue, you'd have to completely rewrite and convert those packages, a much bigger project. All right, let's talk about money. Because no matter how cool the features are, cost is always a huge part of the decision, right? So let's take a look at how these two services approach pricing, because, again, they're pretty different. AWS Glue is pretty straightforward when it comes to pricing. Basically, you pay for the computing power you use, which they measure in something called DPUs, or data processing units, and you're billed by the second. This simple approach makes it way easier to guess what your bill is going to be. Azure Data Factory, on the other hand, well, its model is a lot more granular. That can be a good thing, but it's also definitely more complex. See, with ADF, you're getting billed for a bunch of different things: the compute units, how many times your pipelines run, even read and write operations. And as one analysis from Uplat's blog points out, this multi-faceted pricing structure can make cost prediction more challenging. So what does that mean for you? Well, Glue's predictable price is a huge plus for jobs that are maybe experimental or don't run on a regular schedule. ADF's model, though, can actually be super cost-effective if you have pipelines that are running constantly and are really well optimized. So after all that, who's the winner? Who takes home the belt? Well, the truth is, there's no single winner here. The best tool isn't about which one has a longer feature list. It's about which one is the right fit for your team. your setup, and what you're trying to accomplish. You should definitely pick AWS Glue if you are all in on the AWS world. It's the clear champion if your team is packed with folks who are strong with Python or Scala. It's perfect when you need to unleash the raw power of a serverless Spark engine for some serious, heavy-duty data processing, especially if you're building a data lake from scratch. On the other hand, you should absolutely crown Azure Data Factory the winner if your universe revolves around Microsoft and Azure. Or if you're living in that hybrid world, trying to connect your on-prem data centers with the cloud, ADF is the go-to choice if you want to empower your whole team with a low-code tool, if you need to connect to a ton of different data sources, or, and this is a big one, if you're trying to migrate all those old SSIS packages. So, what are other people saying? Don't just take my word for it. It's an incredibly tight race out there. If you look at user ratings from Gartner, both tools get scored really, really high. Azure Data Factory has a slight edge, but they're neck and neck. And what that tells you is that both of these are seriously mature, powerful platforms that are delivering huge value for the people who use them. So in the end, it really boils down to this fundamental trade-off. Are you looking for that code-driven, automated power of a super smart assistant that lives and breathes AWS? Or do you need the visual, flexible control of a custom assembly line that can plug into just about anything? There's no single right answer. The best tool is the one that fits your world, your team, and your goals. The only question left is, which champion will you choose?